Little and Broken, but Still Good, by Wicked Writer on AO3. Episode 10, Chapter 10. It took a surprisingly long amount of time for Shouta to give a statement. Luckily, it was obvious that Nakio had been drinking, so they put him in the back of the police car, while Shouta explained to Kiego what had happened. Nakio was in violation of his patrol, so he was going to spend the night sobering up at the station, and they would figure out what to do with him after that. Shouta was almost cited with assault, but luckily Seijiro showed up and managed to talk Nakio down from pressing charges, although he will have to deal with his probational officer in the morning. Hizashi was giving a statement to Ejiro, while Hitoshi took Eri inside to try and distract her from what just happened. Shouta watched as Hizashi talked animatedly, recalling the events. He felt bad for getting him wrapped up in this mess. After all, he didn't know half of what was going on exactly, only that Hitoshi's dad was drunk and Shouta punched him in front of the police officer. I shouldn't have hit him, Shouta said, out loud to no one in particular. Unfortunately, Kiego was standing there. Probably not, he shrugged. But that was one hell of a right hook you got. I would have not expected that from you. Most people don't. Shouta was used to being underestimated. It was actually a tactic that came in handy on multiple occasions. Maybe I judged you too quickly, Aizawa. Kiego took a piece of candy from his pocket and popped it in his mouth. Come by the station on Monday and we can talk about that piece you're writing. He should have been happy to hear that, but Shouta just nodded. Truth be told, he was feeling too emotionally drained from this whole ordeal. Once the adrenaline wore off, all that was left was an empty shell rather feeling anything else. Regret or shame should have made an appearance first. But Shouta really didn't care too much about his actions. If he had the chance to redo it, he probably would have done the same thing. He just wished he didn't involve Hisashi in it. But at the same time, he was also grateful that Hisashi was here to help. He managed to keep both kids safe, and got the police here in time before anything got worse than what happened. Shijiro exited the building. He had been talking with Hitoshi inside, trying to gather what exactly had happened and figure out the next steps. Well, this was an eventful night. He sighed and leaned against the wall by Shouta. I know that it wasn't undeserved, but you can't just hit Hitoshi's father. Then maybe he should have learned to treat his son better. Shouta answered flatly. Kigo laughed. I like you, man. You seem to be good people. Can you give us a moment? Shijiro shot him a look, and Kiego left to check on the kids and get their statements as well. That left Shijiro and Shouta alone. They had known each other for a long time. Back when Shouta signed up to be a foster parent, he got a couple of kids from Shijiro, who was surprised at how involved Shouta was. He always gave the kids the best place he could, making them feel welcome and provided some type of stability that they hadn't known. Over the years, they grew into friends, and Shijiro found he was favoriting placing kids with Shouta, since he knew they would be safe with him. He was also the only reason that Shouta was able to adopt Eri. Purely by coincidence, he was selected to be the case carrier to help relocate Eri after Overhaul was arrested. Shouta asked if he could foster her, but given his job and how close he was to the case, since he was responsible for writing the article, it was denied. Shijiro was able to argue in favor of Shouta, which eventually turned into adoption. If it weren't for Shijiro, who knows where Eri may have ended up. I talked to Hitoshi. He wants to stay, but with how his father was acting, I don't think it's a good idea. Why not? If he wants to stay, he should stay. Having him stay would just be needlessly edging on Nakio. I think he should stay with me for a day or two until we formalize a more solid game plan. So, we're just giving into his actions and taking Hitoshi away from where he feels the most comfortable. Shijiro sighed. Shouta, I don't want to. You know that I want him to stay. But Nakio is still his father, and if staying is going to make the situation worse, I don't want anything to happen when he returns home. It was true. Eventually, Hitoshi would have to return home. He couldn't stay with Shouta forever, not with Akio still being his legal guardian. That was the goal, and sometimes downfall, of the foster system, reuniting the families, so long as if it didn't seem the child would be in danger. they would eventually return home, even though Nakia wasn't a stable person. As long as he was physically didn't endanger Hitoshi and followed whatever programs the court required, they would eventually be reunited. So he would have to cave, allow Hitoshi to leave, so when he came back home there, he wouldn't be repercussioned for tonight. The system is not perfect. We both know this. But it's what we got, and we need to do what we can to protect Hitoshi. Chijiro placed his hand on Shota's shoulder for a moment. He was right. It would be best for Hitoshi. By the time Hisashi was finished, Chojiro left with Hitoshi, who really didn't want to leave. They had a brief conversation, and he realized that it was for the best, although that didn't stop him from complaining about it. Shouta double-checked that his phone number was still programmed into Hitoshi's phone, just in case he needed to get a hold of him for whatever reason. He promised to text him daily to check in, which put Shota's mind at ease. The officers got into their car, and Shouta could finally feel the cold air. It chilled him right down to the bone. He hadn't noticed before with everything going on, but his fingers had gone numb and he was starting shivering. Come on, let's get you inside and warm up. Hisashi led him inside. Shouta briefly wondered if he should say something against this. After all, Hisashi had said earlier this evening that he shouldn't come over, but given the situation, he was glad to have help around him. Harry was wrapped up in a blanket on the couch, sound asleep. He breathed a sigh of relief, seeing her unharmed. Even though the chances of her getting involved were slim to none, thanks to Hisashi removing her from the whole situation, he was still reassured to see her safe. Without thinking, Shouta went to the couch and picked her up gently, careful not to wake her up as the blanket fell down to the cushions. He excused himself for a moment to go put her to bed, and Hisashi volunteered to make some tea. Putting Eri to bed was simple. She was so tired from the ordeal that she didn't even stir as Shouta put her down and tucked her in. He was thankful that nothing had happened to her. By the time he came back, Hisashi was on the couch with 2 mugs of tea, sitting on the coffee table. When he sat, he must have startled Hisashi, since his back was to the hallway that Shouta came out of. He handed one of the mugs over and Shouta clutched it in his chest. The smell of caramel was calming, and Shouta thanked him. They sat in silence for a couple moments. Shouta just wanted some time to let himself absorb his action. Punching Nakia was a really stupid idea. Obviously, he was going to find some way to retaliate. Hopefully, Hitoshi would be left out of it. But that may just be wishful thinking. Look at your hand. Hisashi's voice nearly made him jump out of his own skin. Where's the first aid kit? Bathroom, first door on the right. He didn't bother pointing. Hisashi would figure it out. With a rather loud sigh, Hisashi got up and went to fetch the kit. He returned and immediately placed Shota's right hand into his thigh, so he could see the scrapes on his knuckles. That was enough for him to place the tea back down, worried he was going to wind up spilling it on himself. All he could do was stare as Hisashi worked on cleaning out and patching his knuckles. The warmth of Hisashi's leg against his palm pulled all his attention, effectively blocking out the rest of the world around them. It felt too small in the apartment, like the air suddenly grew too heavy and breathing was getting difficult. He took a few stuttering breaths as Hisashi cleaned his hand with an antiseptic wipe. Hopefully he could pass it off as a reflex from the icy cold medicine. I told you I would have to take care of you eventually. Hisashi chuckled as he finished the last of the bandage. He looked up, and Shouta was drawn to those sea-form green eyes. A response was probably needed, but his throat was too dry to form words. Instead, he tracked the movement of a lock of blonde hair that fell in front of Hisashi's face. The urge to reach out and tuck that piece of hair behind his ear was overwhelming. Honestly, the only reason he didn't was the fear of moving would spoil the moment. Don't get used to it. Shouta finally found his voice. I'm not one of your students who you could lecture about fighting before giving a band-aid and kissing their wounds to make them feel better. Hisashi seemed to pause in thought for a moment before he acted. Slowly, he lifted Shota's hand up from where it rested on his thigh. He watched with rapt attention as Hisashi placed a soft kiss on his knuckles, right on top of the bandage, which were far too thick for Shota's liking since he couldn't feel much. but it was enough to remind him how much he wanted to return the favor, how much he wanted to kiss Hisashi with no regard of what happened afterwards. He knew they shouldn't. They talked about this already. They needed to keep their distance until the end of the school year, but Shouta was already starting to forget why. When Hisashi looked back up, the smirk on his face faded. He wasn't sure what type of expression Shouta had, but it must have been enough to convey the thoughts that were swimming in his head. Hisashi's eyes darted ever so briefly to his lips, before turning back to make eye contact. That subtle movement was enough to finally crack the tough exterior that Shouta had always worn. He lurched forward and collided his lips with Hisashi's. It was like the floodgates had opened. A torrent of water rushed forward with no way to stop it. He threaded his fingers into Hisashi's hair. The silky, soft texture caressed his hand and pulled him closer. The other hand found its way against Hisashi's hip, gripping the coarse denim harder than he anticipated. Nearly every night, he would imagine what it was like to finally kiss Hisashi, to pull him close and never let go. Of course, those daydreams were nothing compared to actually having him pressed against his chest, Hisashi clutching onto his shirt like he was afraid he was going to disappear. Hisashi returned the kiss with as much enthusiasm as possible, lips moving as gentle puffs of breath escaped. Shouta tentatively allowed his tongue to glaze against Hisashi's lips, and the response was instant. He opened his mouth and allowed Shouta to explore every inch of it, tongues brushing together gently. When he tightened his grip on Hisashi's hair, he was rewarded with a soft moan, something that could have been easily missed if Shouta wasn't paying as close attention as he was. He wanted to hear more, wanted to hear every noise that Hisashi made. Briefly, he wondered how loud he could make Hisashi scream as he fucked into him. It was something he would give anything to find out. It seemed like Hisashi was on the same page. As soon as Shouta allowed the hand on his hip to drift up to soaking in the warm skin of Hisashi's back, he moved, crawling onto Shota's lap. Hisashi started kissing with increased vigor. It was a tumble of lips and limbs. They fell onto the couch, Hisashi straddling Shouta. "Sho," Hisashi whispered against his lips. "Should we stop?" "Please don't." That was all the encouragement he needed. Hisashi resumed kissing, although the frantic pace slowed slightly. They exchanged kisses for a while. Shouta hadn't been paying attention to how much time had passed, but he was aware how tight his pants had been getting. He gave experimental rolls of his hips, and Hisashi whimpered against his mouth. Taking that as a positive, Shouta continued that movement, grinding their hips together. Every noise that Hisashi let escape only fueled Shouta more. Even with everything going on, they were both careful to keep as quiet as possible. Shouta pulled away, intent on asking Hisashi to join him in his bedroom, when a small voice spoke up from the hallway. "Daddy?" That was like a bucket of cold water poured directly on top of him. It took Shouta a few seconds to process what was happening, but in that time Hisashi's face turned crimson. He was staring at Shouta, obviously unsure of what to do. There was no way that Eri could see them. The back of the couch was facing the hallway, but it was still awkward to be caught like a couple of teenagers making out on the couch, which they were definitely acting like. Shouta moved to help Hisashi sit up, but refused to look up, letting his hair block the redness of his face. The blush was an adorable look on him. "Yes, Eri?" Shouta looked over at his daughter. She was clutching Lemillion to her chest, and looked confused, yet on the brink of tears at the same time. "I had a nightmare. It was the bad man." "It's okay, sweetheart. Crawl into bed and I'll be there in a moment, okay?" She gave one last look between him and Hisashi before agreeing and heading back towards her room. "I'm so sorry, Sho." Hisashi had started as soon as Eri was out of earshot. "I shouldn't have." "Don't worry about it. Be a parent." Shouta knew something like this would have happened sooner or later, although he always wished it was later. "No, I'm sorry. I won't." Shouta leaned in and kissed Hisashi once more, cupping his jaw to carefully cradle his head. When they broke, Hisashi looked a little too stunned to say anything else. "I don't regret it. Do you?" Hisashi shook his head. "Good. Give me a few minutes to get Eri settled, and then we could talk." While it was extremely difficult to walk away from Hisashi, Shouta knew he couldn't leave Eri alone for too long after a nightmare. Unfortunately, those were still frankly common to her. and he was well versed in what to do to help her the most. Hopefully, when he finished, he would be able to resume what had started on the couch. Realistically, though, now that they had time to process what happened, they would both come to the conclusion that this was it for the night. They couldn't go any further than they already did. Eri was the reason why. Not that Shouta would blame her for anything. It was his job as her father to give her the best childhood possible, and dating her teacher made her vulnerable to people using that as a weapon against her. Some parents may think she would get special treatment because of their relationship, or students may bully her about it since kids can be cruel for no reason. It would be better for her to just wait the few short months left of the school year. If he was really lucky too, Eri would approve of them together. Shouta had no idea what he would do if she didn't want them together. Obviously, he would pick his daughter's side, but it would hurt. Although he would be damned if she ever knew that bit. The lights in her room were on, and Eri was curled up around Lemillion. But she was staring at the wall as if lost in thought. Shouta kneeled down beside her bed and gave her a soft smile. He tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "You want to talk about it?" He kept an even tone, so not to scare her. "I dreamed I was in the room again." From the few pictures that Shouta had seen in the police report, Eri was kept in a small room with a bed that had one blanket and not much else. He had no idea why she was kept there or for how long. "He came in and yelled at me." Tears started falling down her face. "You're safe now." Shouta clasped one hand around her and placed a kiss on her forehead. "You'll always be safe with me. I promise, sweetheart. Nothing bad will happen again." No matter how much he wished for it, Shouta couldn't turn back the cruel fate of time. He couldn't magically erase the years of abuse she had endured, but he could protect her from anything in the future. He could try and give her a life that would be overwhelmingly filled with happiness, and her time with Overhaul would be a distant memory that couldn't be recalled. He allowed Eri this time to cry, and when she was ready, he tucked her in bed. They talked a bit longer, giving her some time to forget the nightmare that woke her. Just as it looked as she was starting to return to his old self, Eri brought up the topic that Shouta wished she wouldn't. "What were you and Mr. Yamada doing?" Shouta was taken aback slightly, starting to think of some excuse that could fool her as to what they were doing, but she looked at him so expectantly, he couldn't lie to her. He sighed before deciding on how to word it. "I kissed Mr. Yamada." "Ew, why?" It sounded like a judgment statement, but more of a statement than every 5-year-old believes that kissing is gross and doesn't understand why grown-ups do it. "Because I really like him." "Mai says her parents kiss because they like each other, so I guess it's okay, but only if you really, really like Mr. Yamada." Shouta chuckled. "I really do. Would it be okay with you? After the school year is over, I ask Mr. Yamada to be my boyfriend." "Boys are gross." Eri looked down at Lemillion, probably now realizing that Mirio, who she adores, is in fact a boy. "But if it means I get to see Mr. Yamada when I'm not at school, then it's okay." On the inside, Shouta was grinning like a madman. He finally had confirmation that Eri would approve of them together. But on the outside, he remained calm. He finished tucking her in and gave her one last kiss on the forehead before turning on her nightlight and leaving. It was routine of them by now that Eri would try to sleep in her own bed again, and if she had another nightmare, she was welcome to sleep in Shota's bed. Most often, after being calmed down, she would remain in her own room. Sometimes, though, when the nightmare was particularly bad, she would crawl into Shota's bed and cling on to him like life depended on it. Those nights were always rough. Shouta was too worried to fall asleep again, and would lie awake holding his daughter, trying to curse some villain he had never met. Shouta didn't know the full fate of Overhaul, or Kai, as he later found out. When he took an Eri, he passed the story on to another reporter at his work. He was worried that having pictures of him at their apartment when she was recovering would be too triggering. At the end of the trial, he did ask his co-worker, who informed him of the life prison sentence, but didn't ask for details. It was enough of a closure to know that he would never hurt her again. When he made it back to the main room, Shouta was a little disappointed to see Hizashi standing by the door with his shoes on already. "Listen, Sho." Hizashi started. He looked worried, like Shouta was going to be upset with him. I can't do this to one of my students. I understand, Sashi. Shouta gave him a reassuring smile. And it's just 3 months. We can make it 3 more months. Shouta watched as the worry melted away from Hisashi's face, leaving a bright cherry smile in its place. It was something that Shouta would like to see every day, the way his entire being changed to be the light that Shouta was drawn to each and every time. Can we still talk on the phone, though? Hizashi asked. I would like that. Can I give you one more kiss? Shouta knew he shouldn't, but being around Hizashi made him finally understand the impulses of Icarus. Only Hizashi would never burn him if he got too close. When Hizashi nodded, Shouta surged forward, unable to restrain himself. With one hand, he cradled Hisashi's jaw. The other, he placed on the small of his back and pulled him as close as possible. Hisashi's hands were firm against his chest, thumb brushing against the fabric of the shirt. Shouta wasn't as in shape as he used to be. The years of overworking took its toll, but Hisashi didn't seem to mind. He kissed Hisashi like it was the last time they were ever going to see each other, although he may have miscalculated how close they actually were. Hisashi's back hit the door, but neither of them cared as they desperately clung on to each other. This time, it was Hisashi who brushed his tongue against Shota's lip, asking for entrance. Naturally, he obliged. They continued for a few moments, taking in as much of each other as possible. Hisashi moved his thumb lower to tease at Shota's nipple. Though the fabric of the shirt dulled it slightly, he couldn't help but let out a groan. They broke apart for air, both breathing heavily against each other's lips. Before Hisashi could suggest to stop, which was what he was fully anticipating, Shouta latched onto his neck and kissed along his pulse point. Hearing Hisashi's sharp intake of breath as Shouta gently sucked was enough to drive him wild. There was a reminder in the back of his mind that he needed to stop, although he really wished that part would be silent. Instead, he broke apart from Hisashi, moving just enough to gather his thoughts. You should go. He breathed against Hisashi's skin. Otherwise, I'm going to drag you to my room and make you forget your own name by morning. There was a hum from Hisashi before he answered. As amazing as that sound, we shouldn't. Shouta forced himself to take a step back, giving some space between the two of them. There was a beautiful mark forming on Hisashi's neck. It wasn't enough that it would remain for longer than a few hours, but hopefully in the future he would allow it to go further. He would love to mark Hisashi up and let the world know who he belonged to. They took a second to straighten their clothes, both becoming quite disheveled in the few moments that they were attached. 3 months, Hisashi asked. 3 months, Shouta nodded. It took a lot of effort for them to finally say their goodbyes, but when they finally did, the apartment felt too small. With the rest of the energy he had, Shouta cleaned up the mugs and placed them in the sink before heading to bed. His tiredness caught up to him rather quickly. As soon as he crawled into bed, he could feel the exhaustion. Just before he was completely asleep, his phone went off. He picked it up and looked at the bright screen. It was a text from Hisashi, texting him goodnight. It was something so simple, and yet Shouta was completely enamored with the gesture. He replied something similar before falling asleep and dreaming of holding him closer. The dilemma I'm facing of whether to age restrict this or not, because technically they didn't do anything, but at the same time it was very graphic, but not super fucking graphic. It was making out and a little bit of dry humping. There was that. Fuck it. I'm gonna age restrict it just because, I don't know, I'm gonna age restrict it. Also, y'all fucking gross. Y'all can't take it. Y'all can't keep it in your pants. I am ashamed of y'all. Also, go to work. I also love that Aries, if I get to see Mr. Yamada, then yeah, you could date him. Right? I love that. I love that. Aries oh, you like him? No, I don't care if you like him or not. I get to see him more? Yes. Right? Because normally when you think of a child, asking hey, can I date this person? The child, at least from my understanding on multiple social, not social medias, but main media, the child is always well, if you like him and he likes you, then okay, right? Aries nah, fuck that shit. I don't care if you two like each other. I like him. And if I get to spend more time with Mr. Yamada outside of school, then yeah, you could date him. Eri is out for her, herself, and her. And I love that. I love that. I love that. You go, Eri. You go, Eri. You get yourself that amazing second dad. Get yourself that amazing second dad. I also, let's talk about Hitoshi's situation. I hate how he was taken. I really hate it. I really fucking hate it. I hate how he was taken. I don't like it. I don't like it. He should have not been taken. Right? But I also understand. At the same time, I don't want Hitoshi to be physically hurt by his father, but if he is physically hurt by his father, that means his father will lose custody. Therefore, Shouta can gain custody. So if push comes to shove, like I say all the time, do I wish for, Inko to die? No, but sometimes sacrifices need to be met for my found family. And in this case, sacrifices need to be met for my found family. And if Hitoshi needs to be a little hurt so that he could gain 2 amazing dads and an amazing sister, then sacrifices need to be met. Am I gonna age restrict this? Fuck! I don't know. You know what? Because they didn't necessarily do anything, I'm not gonna age restrict it. I'm not. Because they didn't do anything. Okay, back to my talk. Sacrifices need to be made, right? I want Hitoshi, obviously, to be happy, right? But, is he really happy with Nakio? Like, come on. Is he really happy with him? Nah. So, yeah, the dilemma. The dilemma of found family. Literally, the dilemma of found family is, for found family to work, it is really rare to have someone who has an amazing family seeking family elsewhere from their family, right? It's really fucking rare, right? And found family works best when it's like, oh, our families are shit. Therefore, I find comfort in this family that is not of blood. The whole saying of blood is thicker than water, which is actually something blood is thicker than the water of the womb, right? Coveted blood is thicker than the water of the womb. Whatever. Point taken is, the saying has been taken apart from what its true meaning is, which is, yes, blood is thicker than water, but that's not the saying. That's not water. Water is supposed to be the family because it's supposed to be water of the womb, right? And blood of something else. Blood is supposed to be what's thicker in the sense of the friendships and familiarships that you choose are always going to be stronger bonds than the ones that you were gifted when you were born, right? Or not always, but most of the time, especially, right? I know a lot of people say oh, family over friends. No, I feel you need both familiarships and friendships to thrive. And sometimes people aren't gifted good familiarships. Think about Eri. She was literally abused. Think about Hitoshi. Literally has to live with an alcoholic, right? You cannot tell me that they love their abusers or, their alcoholic dad more than they love people around them who actually show them kindness and actually cares enough to not hurt them. I've always had a hate for people who are oh, well, your family is always your family and they're always going to look out for you. How privileged are you? Not everybody has a wonderful family. I'm lucky to have a nice family, right? I'm lucky to have a good mother, a good family, right? I still seek found family elsewhere. Do not get me wrong. That probably comes from my daddy issues, but right, and stems from the fact that daddy issues. It's literally just fucking daddy issues. Okay, weather. Where are we at? Anyways, but I've always thought, okay, those people who say that, it's yes, me and my family, no matter what they do, I will always forgive them. You should always forgive family. Family's family. I'm sorry. That is such a privileged bullshit thing to say. What about Eri's family? Do you think that Eri should forgive Overhaul, right? I don't even think in this fanfiction Eri is actually Overhaul's daughter, but let's just, go under the influence that, Eri is Overhaul's daughter. You're gonna look Eri straight in the eyes and tell her to forgive Overhaul? Really? What about Hitoshi? We know for a fact that Hitoshi and his father are actually biological, so are you gonna look at Hitoshi and say to suck it up because he's your dad? No, you're not. You're not. That's why, yes, familiarships are important. And it is amazing when you could get that from your actual family, your biological family. But sometimes people have to turn to found family because sometimes their family is shit. Sometimes people aren't gifted to have good parents. Sometimes parents don't care about their family. And also, those people who say that, like, invalidate a lot of adopted families. Like, they're like, oh yeah, blood over anything else. Are you really gonna tell that to that couple over there who literally can't have a child, whether it be because it's a straight couple and one of them is infertile, whether it be because it's a gay couple, whether it be it's a straight couple who just don't want to have a biological child because they want to help a child who, is already out in the world and doesn't have anybody, whatever it is. Are you gonna tell them that their family is invalid because, they're not biologically related because they don't have blood relations, right? That's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. I always think that people who have that saying can be a little privileged-minded when they undermine all the other families and stuff. I know I knew someone personally, right? Not everybody who believes this is obviously privileged and undermining everybody else, but those who are like, oh, well, this is this, and it doesn't change anything. Family is family, and it doesn't matter what situation, right? Those people specifically. It's like, no, stop it. Shut up, right? Because I know there's, obviously, I have a friend who's like, yeah, family is everything, right? But then in certain situations, they're like, oh yeah, in that situation, family is not everything. Leave them, honey. Go away, right? But for their motto, they're like, my family is my everything. And I wish for everybody to have that. To have their blood family, their biological family be their everything and be able to give them everything, but not everybody is privileged enough, right? She understands that she has a privilege in the sense of her family is good, right? And she wishes that for everybody, to everybody have a good family, but unfortunately that does not always happen, right? She's always like, family is family, in the sense of whether it is your biological family or your chosen family, but family is family. Whether it's the family you chose because those family are better than your biological family, or it's the biological family that you were gifted with that happened to be good. So that is your family, right? But as I was saying, I've met someone before who was like, it does not matter what happens, it does not matter anything. If that is your biological family, that is your biological family. And it's like literally infuriating to have those type of people, because it's like, dude, not everybody gets a nice family, right? You're privileged in that way to have a good family so that you can believe that family is everything. But not everybody has a wonderful family. Not everybody has a loving family, right? In Hitoshi's case, trust me, I do not think Hitoshi is safe in that household. Even if the guy stops drinking, he's homophobic. Hitoshi's clearly gay. He's gonna start dating Kaminari. It is literally in the tags. What's gonna happen then? What is gonna happen then? What's gonna happen then? I'm a little heated. You could tell. I'm a little heated. I really hate Hitoshi's fucking father. Like, you and me both, Shouta. You and me both. I would have knocked him out. As I said, Shouta handled himself a little better than what I would have done. I would have just, I would have. Oh my God, 6 feet under. 6 feet under, I'm telling you. 6 feet under. I'm not gonna do that whole question thing because this wasn't that much of a big episode, and or not big, but hard episode. That and you guys y'all had that eraser mic moment, so I think you're good. I think that kissing, teenagers kissing kind of thing is good. Jesus fucking Christ, what the fuck? Is this regular people feel? I'm an asexual. I don't know. I don't know. Are you guys like this? Is this a normal occurrence? Is this normal? I don't know. I am staring at my fucking mic wig and it is staring at me mockingly. Like, shut the fuck up. Motherfucker is so fucking long. Like, I'm not joking. This shit is fucking long. I envy the day that I have to put that on for a stream, and then I'm gonna have to brush it. Every time I put it on, I'm gonna have to fucking brush it. It's like that Tangled. Every time I'm brushing it, all I think is the Tangled movie, and then I brush and brush and brush and brush and brush. That's all that's going in my head. Just brush and brush. Like, just Rapunzel. I feel like Rapunzel when I have that on, especially when I'm combing it, right? I'm this close to just hair. What is her song that she sings to to make her hair glow? I might have to just start singing that shit as I'm fucking, brushing Mike's wig. I need to style Hitoshi's wig too. Okay, I'm getting off topic. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.